I think we would be remiss if we didn't ask all the teachers, college, university, public school teachers, stand up. Thank you so much. And I know this is not a rally, so it's hard for me because I've got on my blue and Pat Wright said, oh, you've got on your Badger colors. Okay, I've got on my Badger colors. But I am a Democrat, and I'm proud of it. But I've got a lot of friends that are Republicans, and let me tell you something, they're not happy about Lawrence either. So it's not partisan, it's not red, it's not blue, it's not independent. I have to tell you about Asa Hutchinson. I'm going to tell you, if he had been governor, this would not have happened, and he's a Republican. I know that. So it is political. Our two state representatives are not here. You see them in this room? They're not here. I don't see them anywhere, by the way. They don't come to much of the things I go to. So it is political. Votes have consequences. I'm going to say it again. Votes have consequences. What you're looking at with LEARNS is the consequence of your votes, my votes, our votes last November. Votes have consequences. And in Arkansas, we don't vote. When you've got barely half of your registered voters voting, when you've got only 16% of the 3 million people that live in Arkansas even active in the political process that even want to go register, and then even if you register, they're not voting. Joyce Elliott, who did a fantastic job with Get Loud Arkansas, registered 40,000 new voters. Less than half of them went to vote. We're learning a lesson, folks. It's not enough to register them. We got to take them with us, hand by hand, to the polls. Yes, we've got voter registration forms at the back. Take them with you. Register people. But don't leave it there. Take them to the polls to vote. School board elections are when? Next week? Correct? Okay. All right, so we've got school board elections around the state. We've got to get out and vote. You know, they moved the school board elections back, and that's back the way it used to be. But votes have consequences. You know, if we don't know where we've been, we don't know where we're going. So when you study history and you talk about what happened in Germany and you talk about what happened with World War II, you know who they came after first in Germany? And those of you, Tom George here, you know the history. They came after the teachers first. They came after the professors. They came after the universities because they knew if they took that out, if they took out the knowledge givers, then they could win. People, that's happening right now, and I hate to say that we are. Rex Nelson is so right. I am so proud of Rex Nelson for calling out all of this injustice. So proud of him. I'm proud of John Brummett. If you don't read John Brummett, then please start reading him because he is also calling it out. It's not political. It's on both sides of the aisle. There's no one any more Republican. Rex Nelson is just as Republican as I am a Democrat. But we agree so much of the time. And so we are involved in really looking now at what happened before is happening again. I'm old. I'm 80 years old. I remember the teacher test. How many of you remember the teacher test? I remember this same thing. I remember rallies. I remember Tom Dillon coming to Malvern. I remember traveling all over. I was one of the 9 litigants that sued Bill Clinton. He'll never let me forget it. But I did sue him. 9 of us sued him because it wasn't about the test. It was the way it was done, the same thing about LEARNS. It was the way it was raced through. It was the way that they were going to make us take a test when we had already graduated from college. We had master's degrees. We had all kinds of knowledge. But we had to take this little test in order to prove to the people of Arkansas that we could read and write and do simple math. We filed suit. Same thing we're going through right now. That will be our last, and there will be a suit filed over LEARNS. We're going to try to repeal it first, but there will be a suit. We filed our lawsuit. And I remember standing on the steps of the Capitol, and I remember those hundreds and hundreds of teachers out there, a sea of teachers. And we stood there. We were not afraid to stand up. We called out Bill Clinton. We said, this is wrong. We don't mind a test, but we want a national test. And that was when we started down that road, Judy Harrison, with a national test. And now our teachers, Tyler, you are going to also take a national test to be a principal when you get your degree in ed leadership. We now in Arkansas, Texas has kept their teacher test, but we did away with the teacher test and we went with a national test. It took a lot of work, it took a lot of energy, it took a lot of guts to stand up to the governor back then. Now later on, y'all know the story, Bill Clinton came to us, came to AA and NEA, got down on his knees and apologized and said, please forgive me, I did not know what I was doing. Will you please help me be president of the United States? And so we forgave him and he became president of the United States. He made a big mistake. Okay, now I don't know if Sarah is going to come back and ask us to forgive her when she wants to be president of the United States. But I see that coming because she has made a big mistake. And when I talk to my friends who voted for Lawrence, so many of them said, I voted for Lawrence because I had to. I had to. I had to vote for Lawrence because if I had not voted for Lawrence, I would have been punished by the governor. Now people, that's public information. There are enough of those state representatives and senators that have said that we know it's true. So this has got to stop. We've got to stand up. And so just remember that when we got the Teacher Fair Dismissal Act, I was there. I remember we didn't have a Teacher Fair Dismissal Act. And so we said we want protection for our teachers. And we began to work all over the state. We began to get people to help us with that. We went to Little Rock, we lobbied our senators, we lobbied our state representatives. That was not easy. People, we've been here before. It was not easy. We got the Teacher Fair Dismissal Act because the teachers lobbied for it. We did not elect a single soul to the state House or the Senate if they said they were not for the Teacher Fair Dismissal Act. It passed overwhelmingly. It is a model for the entire United States. No other state has that like we had it. Well, guess what Lawrence did? It did away with it. Our teachers today have no protection whatsoever. And only after Sarah was called in about it and said, we cannot get the votes for this if you don't do something, finally she agreed to add in an amendment that there would be one hearing for the teacher before the school board. That's it. There's no Fair Dismissal Act. Now, Vanilla, are you here? Where are you, Vanilla?
Yeah,
she was late. Those of us that have taught in the public schools, those of us, and you know that, it's not that we are leaning on it to say, oh, I'm just going to do anything I want to do because the Teacher Fair Dismissal Act protects me. That's not what it did. It made the administrators accountable. It had a process in place. It had timelines. It said to the teacher, if you don't hear anything by May the 1st, you don't have to go home and worry about it because you have a job. It made those administrators accountable. And so I have students that are now superintendents all over the state. I'm so proud of them. Nikki Thomas, superintendent here, one of my students, one of your students, I'm sure too. And so I know that superintendents appreciated the Teacher Fair Dismissal Act because it was a method of how they can analyze and help teachers, not dismiss teachers, but to help teachers. So, folks, I'm just here to tell you that we have got to stand up. We've got to talk about it. We've got to sign those petitions. We've got to repeal it if we can. We hope the Attorney General will approve this next title. I will tell you, and Judy knows this, that when Steve Graff wrote the actual title, he took it straight out of Learns.
Yes.
And then the Attorney General said it was vague and it didn't make sense, and it was so confusing, and well, I read it one way, and then I was going to vote yes, and then I read it another way, well, I could vote no, and he said it's just too confusing, and so he threw it out. The wording came exactly out of the law. Now, how silly is that? So hopefully this time, when Steve filed it today, that they will go back, and now we will see that it will be approved, and then that's when we've got to go to work, folks. They changed the law. Now it is 50 counties we've got to have signatures from in order to get that and to get it so that we can then vote on it. You know, all of you remember Dale Bumpers, and I remember this one day when he was governor and he was talking to a group, and they were talking about taxes, and they were talking about all of the things that happened, and one of the things that came up was about privatizing. You know, we've been talking about privatizing public schools for a long time, people, because you know why? You know why we talk about privatizing? Because it's all about the money. The money. And so Dale Bumpers said, he said, let me tell you something. When people look at you and they say to you, it's not about the money, well, let me tell you something. It's always about the money. Corporate Arkansas sees those dollars, they see the money going into public schools, and they want it. They want to privatize, they want to bring in groups from out of state. They want to make them, and Judy said it right. I mean, we are going to see so many private schools crop up on every corner, because when you see that money, and folks, let me tell you, it's not just about teachers not being certified. The administrators don't have to be licensed to run these schools. So we could start a school, Pat. We could start a school right here. Pat could be our superintendent. Luckily, she is licensed. But there are no standards. And so this is all about the money, folks. So we've got to stand up. We've got to, remember Nancy Reagan when she told us, what did she say to us? You remember that program she had in the schools? Just say no. She said it was just that simple about kids and drugs. She said all you have to do, children, is just say no. Now, we know that was a little simplistic, but let me tell you about this, about learners. Just say no. So turn to the person next to you and say, just say no. Let's do it one more time. Just say no. If you haven't signed up for cakes, you can do it online. You can write a check tonight, by the way. You can also sign up. You can donate. Steve Graff is a wonderful person. We know him. He's also head of the rural caucus. So I'm working with him on that as well, to try to help our rural community stand up to be counted as well. So folks, this is the time. Tonight there are rallies all over Arkansas. There are people just like you sitting in places just like this. And it's all about politics. I'm sorry. It's all about who we voted for. Now let's get busy. Let's find somebody to run for these offices that are going to be vacant. Richard Womack, by the way, who's our state representative, is term limited, finally. He is term limited. He is leaving. He has served his time, and he's gone. So he's not going to run for the Senate, so he's out. So we need somebody to run. We've heard some people that are interested. We know that perhaps we can run some other people around. Thank you, Zach, for what you're doing on the quorum court. Thank you for all of the people. Any others besides Jack? Who? Oh, Albert Neal. All right. Thank you, Albert, for all you do as well. Thank you so much. It's so important to support our politicians and our people that help us. And yes, Tom.
Do I want to write a check for this stage, or do I want to wait to write a check for the legal challenge? Because I don't see Attorney General Tim Griffin. Well, he will approve it, but it'll be right. He'll disapprove it all of it. Right. So I guess what I'm standing here saying is, we can meet, all we want to meet, but this is all
too
So
hard.
we've got 2 weeks, we can still get 90,000 signatures.
What's the money for?
So you
Okay,
use more
we
signatures.
can't collect signatures, we did this tonight out of our own personal pockets. So we can't really do anything big until there is some money of collecting signatures, to get canvassers, hold rallies, receptions. It takes a lot of money. And Steve said $290,000 is what we need. I heard earlier that it would take over $1 million to do it. So I think Steve's being very conservative, and I understand your concern, I do. But I think we've got to do our very best.
Yeah, and it's about getting the media out, getting the message out, all that takes money as well. Some of you maybe are old enough to remember when we stood in the rain and the cold and the heat to get the signatures for Initiated Act 1. Does anybody remember that? It's Initiated Act 1 way back, and that was going to be the standards in the public schools. And so we did that, and I remember back then, Tom, collecting money, but I remember why we needed money, because we had to have, well, back then we didn't have email, and we didn't have all the things that we have now. But we printed flyers, we got out the message, we put ads in the paper, we did everything we could to collect those signatures. And we failed. We did not get it on the ballot, and part of it was because we could not get enough money. Now, fast forward a few years later, 1983, Bill Clinton then appointed, y'all remember Hillary Clinton, to be head of the actual standards movement, and she took actually the wording from what we tried to do in Initiated Act 1, and it became Act 445 of 1983. So this may fail as well, but I will tell you this, if it does, only thing we got is the ballot box, folks. So this is the beginning. There will be a lawsuit, Steve knows that, but in the meantime, we've got to assert ourselves, we've got to show force, we've got to stand up, we've got to do what? Just say no. Once again, what do we got to do?